and I didn't know what was wrong with me, and it was actually somewhat getting in the way of being an interpreter. And I was also ready to have my own voice. And so I remember I was maybe 27, 28, and I was thinking, I got to do something else, and what could it be? It could be computers, because you know, I was really drawn to computers, which could have been a life of actually having money, or I somehow felt like I could make films. And it was really that crossroad. And I started making films, and I was really good at it really fast, and it really felt like I found my medium. It used all parts of my brain. It used everything I was good at. And I was really, really quick to actually understand the medium. So there I was, you know, kind of making films. And I always tell people, you need a story to tell. You have to have a passion to tell a story in order to make a film. And it took me a very long time, and I finally got a diagnosis, and they diagnosed with me actually with Tourette's syndrome, which nobody believes that I really have. And in some ways I have gotten somewhat outgrown it, but I still have it, and that was the point where I'm like, how did it take me so long to get this diagnosis? And I'm living in a medical mecca. I'm in Boston, and it took me so many years to get this diagnosis. And so I finally got it, and I said, why do people not know what this is? And I said, well, I'm in a position that I can tell them. And thinking the film's going to take me 1 year, it took me 5 years to make. And that was Twitch and Shout. And that film, that really changed how people look at not only Tourette's syndrome, but how they look at disability, because it had a lot of humor in it. And I told it really from the point of view of people with it, you know, because I was somewhat of an insider. And so it was such a hit. And I remember, you know, I made it, it took 5 years. You never have any money. You know, you're making it, you're hoping that it's going to get out.
Hope alive.
You sort of hope. And then I finally finished it, and I'll never forget this moment. This was the point where my whole life really changed. Is I had a screening at MoMA, and they accepted it as part of, it's called the What's Happening series.
Oh yes, I've heard of that.
And I remember it was a Thursday night, and it was my first New York premiere. And I said
MoMA,
to the guy,
that's pretty great, yeah.
And I said to the guy, I said, well, you know, what happens if you sell? He goes, oh, we never sell out. Well, it was lines up around, you know, they were completely packed, and I was pulling people out of the audience. But before people came, I invited somebody from Talk of the Town. I invited Ren Wexler, who wrote from Talk of the Town, because I knew Oliver Sacks, which is another little film I should tell you about that I just made about him.
Oh, great.
And I got a connection to Lawrence Wexler. He said he was going to come and write a Talk of the Town. I said, because when people with Tourette watch the film, they interact with the film. And I said, you're going to want to be here, and you're going to want to write something about it. So I ended up... such a long story, but I ended up going to that screening, and I was outside the room. And I would poke in every now and then, and I poked in, and I hear people screaming at one another, because I invited people with the most vocal Tourette. Fuck you, they're screaming at one another. I said, what happened? Well, one guy had come, and he had come with his baby, and you know, it was this new baby, and he had Tourette, and he saw himself on the screen, and he said, that's me, woof, woof, woof. And this other guy who was self-medicating himself with alcohol, kind of went at him, and they had this thing, and they had a rage fit, and they were all kicked out. And I'm like, oh, great. And so at the end of that screening, I had also invited the executive director of POV. And she had said also, I've already seen the film. I said, you ain't seen it in an audience. So she came. So what I used to do is I used to put out these little pieces of paper and put it on the chair, and that's how I'd raise money. And it was like I'd ask $1 of everyone in the theater, and I'd raise like $250. So she came up to me, and this was the moment my whole life changed. And she had the piece of paper, and she handed it to me. She goes, I love the film, and I put it in my pocket. She says, aren't you going to look at it? And I pulled it out, and it said $425 a minute POV. And they accepted it. And I went, she goes, you can't tell anybody. She says, because I was the first one that they had chosen. So she said, you can't tell anybody. I'm like, and that was the point my whole life changed. And they took the film, and they were so great. It was like my baby, and they put my baby in a good school. You know, it was like
so
that.
Great.
And that was like, all of a sudden I was on the map.
That's the trajectory.
I was on the map, and it was such a hit, that film, and it got nominated for an Emmy. And so what I learned from that, the power of media. If you want to change lives, you make films. And that was the addiction. And that was the hook. And that's how it started.
Yeah.
That's how it started. And then it went from there.
So amazing.
And I have to tell you, after each film, I say, I'm never going to do it again.
But you do, and you have.
I say, I'm done, that's it. And then I start over again.